Hello, everybody. My name is Joel Filderman, and welcome to the Dog Trainers Connection. I am not a dog trainer, but these other people you see here are. We get together, we discuss a topic, come up with some thoughts, some ideas, sometimes some answers, but we always have an interesting discussion. Today's topic, I thought it would be interesting today to talk about diversity, to talk about the diversity in dog training. And what that means to you, I leave it up to you, whether you want to discuss the ethnicity and the presumed disparagement of ethnicity in training, or if you want to discuss the fact that the majority of dog trainers are women. And what I would like to discuss with you trainers today is what can we or you as trainers do to improve that disparity? And not just, oh, we need to talk about it more. I'd like to know a little bit more specific than that. Does anybody want to start with that talk? Okay.
All right, I'll go.
Go ahead.
All right, so for anyone watching, I'm white in case your screen is off color. So obviously, every time I talk about sensitive topics, I always try to offer some levity to the situation because, you know, in all seriousness, it is a very sensitive.
It is a serious topic, and
it's very sensitive.
And honestly, I hesitated in discussing it because of that.
Right. So, you know, and we had a quick chat earlier. You know, because we were all concerned because it is sensitive, and our I don't know about anybody else, but anything I offer here is really just my view based on my experience. You know, and we were talking about statistical data and stuff because, you know, and whatever the percentages is, you know, the majority of the dog training industry is women, right? So that we were talking about that a little bit, but, you know, considering it's Black History Month, we want to celebrate that with everyone. So I think that's kind of how the topic came up. So, you know, that being said, my experience in dog training probably has a lot to, as it relates to diversity, probably has a lot to do with where I'm from. You know, I grew up in North Jersey. I lived there most of my life. And, you know, the dog trainers and dog care professionals that I rubbed elbows with were very diverse. Black, white, Asian, Hispanic, men, women, old, young. You know, that's kind of the people that I was around. I didn't like wake up and say, I want to be a dog trainer, but I want to make sure I have a good, solid mix of diversity. Like I didn't, I think it's just a byproduct of where we're from. Being down in North Carolina now for 6 years, the demographic of dog trainers is different here, with the exception of women. I do see more women dog trainers than men. Again, this is not statistical. I'm not offering any kind of information for debate. It's just based on my, you know, experience, observations of what I see. So based on my experience from the north to the south, you know, I see the same as it relates to gender, being that there's more women dog trainers than men. You know, as far as dog trainers by race or ethnicity, you know, my training is different now. I don't do a lot of, I'm not as much in the public as I was up in New Jersey, where I got to be out and about, rubbing elbows, hands-on, working with other dog trainers, where I got to see a whole, you know, a pretty good, you know, diverse and varied group of dog trainers.
And Jeff, I'm curious, do you agree with me saying that the perception of dog training and the dog trainers, that it's not as ethnically diverse as a lot of other things is true? I'm not necessarily talking about what the facts are, what the actual numbers, but that perception of it.
Well, that's the thing. Your perception and my perception can both be right and not the same. That's the problem with this world, is that people can have two different life experiences that draw two completely different conclusions about the same thing, and they argue. But you know, that's, and you know, we don't talk about politics here, but the political landscape, dog training, veganism, religion, you name it. right? People could be talking about the same exact thing, but have two different life experiences, regardless of their background,
Mm-hmm.
and argue about it. So your perception as a non-dog trainer
Mm-hmm.
living in the Northeast, and as it relates to diversity, is going to be different than my experience as a dog trainer
Sure.
living in the Northeast, right? Because
Definitely.
we're crossing paths with different people.
Yeah.
I can tell you this, and and I have to choose my words carefully because sometimes you guys know me, it just comes out sometimes. So it's not that I don't know how to say this. So anyone watching, if you got to throw apples at me, that's fine. I don't care if the dog trainer is black, white, Asian, Hispanic, man, or woman. If they can help a dog,
Mm-hmm.
that's all I care about. And that's how I run my rescue too. I don't care who adopts a dog for me as long as you can provide that dog with the best life possible. And obviously age comes up a lot in rescue. I've adopted dogs out to 19, 20-year olds because they proved to be appropriate parents for
Sure.
that dog, whereas some rescues might shy away from young adults. But as it relates to dog care, I mean, if you are a professional and you are going to help that dog be the best version of her or himself and empower the dog parents to be great guardians, then it shouldn't matter. It shouldn't. And I know the truth is that there's probably some households out there that may not want a man walking into their house, or they
Sure.
may not want a black person walking into their house, or a Hispanic person walking into their house.
Mm-hmm.
That's their problem because they could be missing out on a really talented trainer that can help them, and that sucks for the dog.
Okay.
Right? And everyone knows that human emotions come a very distant second to dogs in my life.
Sure.
So if they can help a dog, and if someone has a problem with that, that's their loss, and it's their dog's loss, sadly.
Okay. And Bonnie, for those who don't know, you come from biracial parents.
I do. Jewish
So,
mother and black father.
okay. And
My father was half black and half German, mother Jewish, but I grew up in Harlem and very, very close to my black relatives who lived next door. And
in case anybody couldn't tell, you're a woman. So,
gee, thanks.
And
what came to mind was when recently with the Floyd incident and the Black Lives Matter and everything that was happening on Facebook. I have to say, when I started talking about my feelings about being part black and what I felt, a whole lot of dog trainers chimed in on my page. I understand what you feel. My grandchildren are black and they go through
mm-hmm.
difficulties with being understood and hearing things. And I really got a lot of support with what I came out and said. And I think, like you were saying, Joel, it's hard to find statistics of how many blacks or minorities are a big part of dog training professionally.
Mm-hmm.
But I find dog trainers some of the most liberal and accepting group of people are the ones that I know and I've met either on Facebook, in conferences. And I don't know maybe why that is, but I find that to be true. And I think that if more young black people could look at the dog-related professions as something that they could move ahead in and be accepted, and that they are valid professions, and that they can get degrees in it and certificates, and
Mm-hmm.
Like you were saying, Steve, vet techs being licensed, and that if we can get more youth in those professions, it would be a wonderful thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I just know when we held our round tables in Manhattan and elsewhere, we were welcomed, and there were people that were politically polar opposites to me,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe even racially, I don't know. But we still, because it was Dog Trainers Connection and with Steve's input at the beginning, like we need to get along because the common denominator is we want to help dogs.
Right.
So you can have a differing opinion, you know, just be respectful to one another.
Okay.
And so it'd be interesting to find out the statistics and to see, you know, and maybe some of you have had experiences. I know Steve was talking about discrimination from the client end to a Black dog trainer that he had as an employee. So it's out there. It's got to be out there because that's people.
Yeah. And Steve, you want to talk about any of that?
I just think about the racially charged, 1960s, early 70s.
I was actually going to ask you, have you seen things change?
Well, I mean, if what you see on TV is a bunch of law enforcement with some dogs like biting Black people, that does not exactly like a very welcoming picture if you're Black. And this is what you see is going on out there. If that's what a trained dog is trained to do, by people of color, that doesn't really make that field very warm and welcoming. It's maybe the first contact to train dogs wasn't obedience competition. It was that aggression. So. I think that if you just go backwards a little bit, it's like, so what did you have when I was a little kid? I mean, I was taken to the shelter for lunch. I mean, that's what my mother did. She put a sandwich in a brown bag and said, let's go to the ASPCA and hang out with the dogs. That was very different upbringing than people who are like, stay away from those dogs because, those biting dogs. And, a lot of my friends who are non-white friends, they were not so quick to be close to dogs. I mean, being friends of mine, ultimately, kind of interesting how some of my non-white friends became like dog owners and, all kinds of stuff, just over the many years. And, I've seen personal changes in my friends because of it was a different context, I mean, they would visit me when I was working nights in the animal hospital. I'd be in there cleaning the surgery room and my friends would show up to help me. I mean, it was kind of funny, but, it's like, this is what you got to do, huh? I'm like, yeah, man, I am the king of the mop, that kind of stuff. And they would come and they would now in a different, it's just a different headspace all of a sudden. Animal hospital, like super professional. I wasn't the most professional employee at the time, but, my friends got to see a different side of it because otherwise, they were raised with dogs. We don't do dogs. I mean, I think recently in New York, they have this whole thing about bird watchers. Have you seen that?
Yes.
Right? Black bird watchers. Right? So you got that guy who ran into that woman, right? And her dog was loose and chasing away his birds. And so he had words with the woman, put your dog on a leash. She calls the police, has the guy arrested. There's this big Black guy who's intimidating me, right? Which she got in deep trouble for because all he wanted was the right thing, which is put your dog on a leash. We're in Central Park, for God's sake. I'm doing my bird thing, I think in this like little white woman's mind, he couldn't be there watching birds. How could this large Black man be there watching birds? This is how messed up people are. So yet at this point, sort of to Jeff's, I mean, I don't know, not everybody knows T. Floyd, but, he's kind of famous now. I mean, when you're a Schutzhund person, who do you go to if you got problems? You go to T. Floyd, right? He's got braids out to here, I mean, he's a scary looking dude, but man, is he an amazing dog trainer. He gets it done. You want a title? Go to T. Floyd, this guy. So, and he and a bunch of his friends, right? Awesome dog trainers. So, things are changing. And like Jeff said, these are Jersey guys that I know, these are Jersey dog trainers, they're sport trainers. And fascinating to me, what do they train? Well, they train tracking, protection, and obedience.
Okay.
But people of color training protection dogs, it's like, things are coming around. things are coming around. These are not drug dealers training dogs to protect crack houses, right? These are guys who are training police-style dog training. So I think it's coming around. It's not coming as fast as it should. I've seen it in veterinary technology. There were not a lot of people of color in the vet tech programs.
Mm-hmm.
That's changing. You walk into like a big specialty hospital now, and you see all sorts of people working, from everywhere, men, women, people of every background. So it's coming around. I mean, it's not fast. I don't think our profession like just quickly jumped into,
right.
Hey, we can do that, or should we do that, or can we do that, or how welcome will we be if we get into that? I mean, it's like, basically, it's like Jeff said, if you're into it for the dogs, then you're welcome. Come ahead, best you can.
And I think, Steve, you made a good point. I don't mean to chime in on you, but talking about our industry, because we all may have opinions on society as a whole and how it could be difficult for certain demographics to achieve success in an industry. The dog training industry is still relatively unregulated, right? So, we don't like the fact that you're a dog trainer just when you say you are, right? We don't like that, right? Because we need to make sure that there's some kind of knowledge base. But the fact of the matter is, currently, you're a dog trainer when you say you are. So right. I think people creating their own opportunities to get into this industry is something that I think should be talked about too, because maybe people think it's hard to become a dog trainer, or it requires some kind of special consideration other than a love for dogs and knowledge base and handling skills, right? So I think regardless of gender or ethnicity, I think people, and maybe this is more for people watching, if they've been on the fence about getting into dog training and think it's hard or there's some kind of roadblocks, do it.
Yeah.
Do it. So I didn't mean to jump in, Steve. I just
I'm with you 100%. As you say, if you're interested, come ahead.
Pam?
Just to one of Jeff's points earlier, that everybody's got their own baggage that they bring along and their own experience. I sat on the Commission for Animal Control in my county for 8 years and adjudicated violations of the Animal Control Code. But what I learned there was really true, and it applies in a lot of situations, that there are 3 sides to every story. There's yours, there's mine, and there's a truth.
The truth.
There's some underlying something that we may or may not see, but that outsiders may approach the situation and see. This is really how it went down. I experienced it one way, you experienced it another way. There's a truth. And I think a lot of that applies to all of us as human beings. My life experience are different from your life experience. What I bring to the table is different than what you bring to the table. So if you go through the world seeing that, knowing that we're all different, we're all individuals, there's that. But it's interesting that you chose diversity and ethnicity as the topic today, because there's a group on Facebook I just became aware of that's uncensored opinions of breeders or something to that effect. And it's for real, like really want you to come out and say, this person is terrible for whatever reason, this person is great. Well, seeing on that page that I've never even seen or thought about before are, I'm searching for a Whifflehound or whatever breed. I'm searching for a whatever. And I only want to buy from people who, they're not Trumpers. They'll work with a gay, queer, lesbian, person of color, African, purple, gray, whatever. I don't want to buy from somebody who won't meet my political
criteria
level. And I look at those comments and I said to these people, to somebody, I actually came out and said, you're looking for a relatively unusual breed. You're going to have a hard enough time finding that breed. If you start adding to your criteria, or with any breed, if your criteria is ethical breeder, does all the health testing, shows their dogs, does this, does that, and you've got a list of 27 things that make it an acceptable breeder. Now you layer on top of it Do their politics agree with yours?
Mm-hmm.
Will they sell to a person of whatever my background or my beliefs are?
Mm-hmm.
You may never find a dog that meets all those criteria.
Sure.
So I think it goes in all directions. We all need to be in one another. We all need to be able to work with one another. I moved from New York to Maryland. I lived in a majority minority county. Prince George's County, Maryland is the largest minority, but I think it was when I lived there, at the top of the demographics in terms of economics. It was the highest income in the county or something was in Prince George's County. The chief of our animal control was Black. His assistant was a Black woman. A lot of the people that worked there that in animal control were people of color. That was the majority of the people we worked with. That was where I lived. I moved from there to Vermont, which is like 99.1% white and 0.9% everybody else.
Everybody else, yeah.
So it's been a very different kind of an experience, but it's all about just people. We're all people. I never saw anybody that I lived with or around or worked with as anything but. I don't know. That's me. Maybe that's an unusual way to go through the world. But when I rode, to your point of most of the professionals being women, when I rode horses, everybody at the barn was a little girl. The instructors, a large percentage of instructors are men.
Yes.
A large percentage of people at the Olympic level are men. My question was always, where did they come from? They were never in the barns as boys. Where did all the men come from? And I see that in dog training too. I see a lot of with, the aggressive dogs or the protection dogs or that sort of thing. And you see a lot of women drawn to the little dogs and that sort of thing. If they weren't there as younger people, where did they come from as professionals?
Okay.
Just been my experience.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. And how many men have the shows or the star dog trainer types are men as compared with women who get pushed up to the top commercial dog training.
Right. The professional handlers that you see are every bit as likely to be men as they are to be women.
Yes.
In the breed rings. And now there's the question of gender. Now, are they men or women? I don't know. We now have all kinds of gender commentary and people are they now. People are not men or women. People are they. So I don't know.
If they're into dogs, who cares?
And I think, yeah.
I think that's generally what everyone's looking for. They just care about getting their dog trained. In my experience, I come from New York as well. I've lived here for, over 25 years and it's very diverse, a melting pot of all different nationalities and cultures and so forth. And, I've worked with a lot of different like Asians and Blacks, and I treat them the same respect I do with whites. And I've had better relationships with them than I have with someone that's of Jewish descent and white like myself. So I've had better experience with a Black person or an Asian versus someone that's pretty much the same as me. So it's, a lot of that has to do with, life experience and so forth like that. And if there's any discrimination in the experience I've had, there might be some underlying discrimination. Don't get me wrong, that they're thinking these things at times, they're just not conveying them to you. Is they're saying, all I know is I'm not gonna get a damn pit bull. Those pit bulls are, and it's like,
and we've had discussions about that.
They're discriminating against the dogs as opposed to, or maybe in addition to people. But in my experience, I have not had that, and I think if you just gotta treat everyone equally and equally the same, and that's it. I lived in North Carolina too, like Jeff, and many years ago, but I wasn't a dog trainer at the time. But it's kind of a mix there too. I would say a mixed bag, not as much obviously as here in New York, but there can be obviously a little bit more racism down south in general. But I guess it comes down to what everyone's saying. It just depends on your life experience. And both can have the same experience, but have a different, rationale or reasoning as to what the outcome is. So they don't actually agree on what that situation was. If that makes any sense, you know.
And I just wanted to add, it probably, I'm sure that some Black trainers, I know you were mentioning a friend, Steve, that maybe if the client that hires them doesn't know what they look like, and then they walk in the door, you know, they probably have experienced that, just like with being discriminated against in different areas of life. So it probably, not probably, I'm sure it's harder for a person of color to get into certain things or to feel completely accepted or comfortable. And hopefully that'll change too.
I mean,
well, actually, you brought up a good point, because that's what I was kind of thinking too. Is I feel, again, just only my own experience, they've always been accepting of me. When I say they, I'm referring to non-white people. Okay, regardless what religion is, whether they're Black, they're Asian, what have you, different color of skin, Indian, whatever it might be. I feel they're more accepting of me versus, you see these in the news and everything, the media, versus it was the other way around. If I was an Asian or a Black person or Black or an Indian, whatever it might be, other than this white, walking into a white person's home, they may allow that, but you might be to see a little bit of pushback on that. You know,
because there's an understanding,
right? Over the phone, when you set the
accepting.
phone up, they're not going to ask you, are you Black, are you Asian, obviously, but unless they can hear the tone of your voice. But when they meet you, there might be that little bit of pushback. But I think in my situation, being on white, they're more accepting of us than the other way around, basically.
Steve, you were going to say something?
I'm thinking about what Pam said. It's like, when you go to the barn and you're a kid, who do you see? You see little girls riding horses, or when you're a little kid and they ask you, can you get your dad to come in and talk about his profession? So the kids who've got like fireman daddies, who comes in, right?
Yeah.
Fireman daddies, cops, maybe a business guy, a doctor. What about a dog trainer? I mean, when would kids get exposed?
I did that. I did when I was volunteering with the Assistance Dog Organization. I got invited to career days. I don't know how we got invited, but we got invited. So my dog and I went to career days, and I didn't just talk about being a dog trainer. I went in and I sat down one day before I went in. I didn't know what I was going to talk to the kids about or have a handout for them. And I sat down and I made a list off the top of my head of 10 or 15 jobs that relate to dogs and animals. And I just made a list, and I made a copy. I had a pile of copies I would leave with the teachers. Dog trainer, groomer, breeder, kennel operator, commercial retail store, all kinds of tack maker, equipment maker kind of thing. And I would stand there with my dog and I would say, there are some jobs, I'm a volunteer, and that means I don't get paid for the job that I do, that there are some jobs that you will do and you will have in your life just because you love them, and you do them because you love them. And that's why I do this particular job. I said, but maybe you love dogs and you love playing with your hair, so you can be a dog groomer. And I had a magazine, I had a copy of Dog World or whatever it was at the time. And it had a picture of, remember the Bichon that went best at the garden? JR, I think was his name, with Scott Summers. So I had a picture of JR and Scott Summers on the back of the magazine. And I'd say, this dog here, you see how cool he looks? Somebody did his hair to look like that. He has his own hairdresser. That's a groomer. You can grow up and do that. I would show them my leash. Somebody grew up and decided to make this as their job. I'd show them I was wearing a ring that was gold and looked like my dog. Somebody was a jeweler involved with dogs and made this. And this is, you can grow up and do, you don't just have to be a veterinarian. Everybody thinks I love animals, I have to grow up and be a vet. So I did that.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Wow.
In Maryland, for a few kids here and there saw that. So we'll see. Anything comes of that.
It's helpful. What about behind bars?
Puppies behind bars?
Behind bars, right? So, who's locked up? Sadly, unfortunately, there are more minorities locked up than there are, and that's a societal issue and problem. But who's getting to train dogs?
Mm-hmm.
Those, right? Which I think is fantastic.
Yeah.
Come out with a good skill, right? Get exposed to dogs in an amazing way. Do something great for the dogs. Does something great for the inmate. I love that kind of stuff. That's the stuff.
I did that too.
Did everything, Sam.
Wait, you went to jail?
Okay, I'm losing control again. I think this is a good place to stop. We could actually go on talking about this for hours.
Yeah.
And I don't think that we came up with any particular answers, but I think we started a very interesting discussion, which maybe we can continue at a later time.
And we hope that people watching this can
contribute
post
as well.
Their feelings and comments and be constructive along with us on this topic.
Yes. So with that, trainers, I'd like to thank you for discussing a fairly sensitive topic very thoughtfully and very honestly and openly. I'd like to thank everybody here watching the video. And don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't already, and like us on Facebook if you haven't already. And we will see you next time. Thanks a lot, folks. Bye-bye.